Good afternoon. I'm Gloria Nelson, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today as your host to our TUG Connects 365 programming. As you settle in and get ready for the start of today's webinar, let me give a brief introduction for TUG, the usergroup.org, for both our current members and those of you who represent organizations that have not yet joined our community of info distribution software users for that market. We've all heard the phrase knowledge is power, and I can say with confidence that after today's presentation, you'll be waking up tomorrow with a little more of both. Today is but one of many of our in-depth sessions in our TUG Connects 365 series. TUG webinars, online forums, and member events facilitate the timely exchange of ideas and information to help you work smarter and with more confidence. That's a powerful combination. And if you're currently a member, it pays to get even more involved. And if you're not, please visit our website to discover why 2,300 heads are better than one to help you be the best at what you do. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Jim Spellos, president of Meeting You, who will be boggling your mind on all he knows about Excel. Jim, go ahead and take it away.
Gloria, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, this is fun with Excel. I know technically we're calling this critical Excel tools for the business professional, but let's forget that. This is about making you comfortable and enjoying how Excel works. So let's start with a very basic poll. This is what I want you to do. Take your phones out and answer a simple question. The question is, what is your Excel self-assessed skill level? Text to 22333, and you have one of four options. If your self-assessed level is expert, I know it all, then the message you'll put in is 296934. If you consider yourself an intermediate, you know what you know, 296936. If you think you're pretty basic beginner and you know you'll learn stuff here, 296949. And if your response is what's a spreadsheet, then please put in 297057, and we'll have a special session obviously about that. So what we want to do is get a sense of where you are. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. While we're having this poll, we have a lot of stuff that we want to cover in a short amount of time. Be sure to use the chat and the Q&A for your questions. We'll have a time at the middle and then at the end to be able to cover all of this stuff that I think is really important. So we don't waste a lot of time. I know a lot of results are still coming in. Let's take a look at what we have in terms of the current responses and where we are at. No surprise. You know, really, when we think about it, I mean, think about this. I've been teaching Excel for over 20 years now, and I don't consider myself an expert. Why? Because Excel keeps adding new stuff all the time. There obviously are a few people here who do, and I think it's great from my perspective. If you're an expert at Excel, then you're really digging deep into visual basic programming and being able to customize stuff like that. To me, that's the expert role. And I know my programming skills are always useful at best. How about we put it that way? So this is what we want to do today. We obviously have a lot to go over in a short amount of time. So let's get a basic menu put together for what we need and what we want to do. Clearly, we're going to talk about formulas. And I know this comes at a very basic level for some folks, but I want you to be really, really aware how important these are. We're going to talk about shortcuts. We're going to talk about some cool tricks, what I consider the Pro Tour of Excel, which includes dealing with pivot tables, and the new Pro Tour of Excel, the future, what has been released in the past year, the dynamic array formulas and how they work and how they're changing the game on an awful lot of what's out there. So we're going to start fundamentally. I never like to say it's basic, but we're going to start on a fundamental level. What we have here is a basic list of housing for an event in the days when events actually took place. Weren't they really cool? And we tend to use Excel more as a database oftentimes than we do as a spreadsheet. So let's just be clear. When we're setting stuff up, we have three basic rules that we want to adhere to. Number one, your first row always contains your columns. Don't put logos or stuff like in there. You don't want that to go there. You want it to have your information for that column. Makes it easier to manage, makes it easier to work. Number two, no blank rows, no blank columns, no exceptions. Don't try to make Excel look pretty, okay? Why? Because we want to make sure that when we start doing some of the very fundamental and advanced stuff in Excel, that we're not missing data. We're not taking information and only pulling a partial amount for the results that we need. So rule number 2, no blank rows, no blank columns. Rule number 3 allows us to go to the bottom of this list to see there are absolutely no totals on here. And that's correct, because your totals don't belong on the same sheet as your data. That's what a secondary sheet is for. For example, here in this particular spreadsheet, I have a summaries page that's using from basic to advanced formulas to be able to grab that information, and more importantly, grabbing that information dynamically. So 3 rules, very fundamental. First row contains your columns, no blank rows, no blank columns, no exceptions, and your tallies, all your data and your tallies separate in different worksheets. So let's move it to day 1 of Excel. I have a blank sheet. If you want to work with me while I'm doing this, that's cool, but we're going to move pretty fast right here. And what I've done here is I've put in 3 numbers that I want to add. I know we're talking simple, but I got to get your head around the concept, which is how we have taught ourselves or learned to do formulas isn't necessarily the ideal way. Now, I know from a very stupid standpoint, stupid on my end, by the way, that if I wanted to add these numbers up, I could go into cell B7, which is where I want the answer to be. I can put in equal. I can put in the word sum. And by the way, on that, something to note, I was doing a session many years ago, and it was a big room, and people had their computers there, and someone raised their hand when I mentioned that, and they said, "Sum doesn't work. I never use it." I scratched my head. I go, "Wait a minute." I go, "What do you mean you never used it?" She goes, "Well, I typed sum in there, and it just doesn't work." What do you say at that point, guys? So understand, we're clear, right? Equal, sum, parentheses. And as I said, in the really old school, and some of you are going, well, I hope this is not what this session is going to be about. And trust me, it's not. But that's a correct formula, right? A1 plus A2 plus A3, we get the number. I don't want you doing that. And many of you are saying, well, no, I wouldn't do it that way. How I would do it is I would go equal sum A1 colon A3, which is really cool. Problem is when you add something to A4 and nothing changes. You see, the issue there, and the reason we don't put the tallies and the data on the same sheet is because the formula that I'm going to suggest is one that makes sure that we always use dynamic information. What does that mean? Well, very simply, it means one thing. Get rid of the numbers. How about that? Equal sum, row letter, colon, row letter, A colon A. Hit enter, and there you go. So no matter what you put anywhere in A, it's going to work that way. And now you sort of understand why the data and the summary information is separate. Because if I took that same formula and put it here, well, you know it's going to happen. You get an error message. In fact, you're going to get something that is called a circular reference, where the result is in the formula and the result in the formula. It's not going to let that work. So at that point, you have to keep adding and moving stuff around. Be really, really clear about how you use basic formula information. And any chance you get to get rid of the numbers, you're not always going to have that opportunity, but any chance you get, do so. You have a lot better possibility of cleaner, more accurate formulas and minimizing those annoying pop-up errors. Okay, so now, a couple things to note. If I'm going to go to D3 right now, and I'm going to type in the word January. I need to put my months in for my year-end report, and I can do that, and it's great. And then what I can do is take this little box down here, which you all probably know, the fill handle, which is beautiful, and click and drag, and all that populates. And in fact, if you really want to be super cool, you can go down that way as well. But here's the thing. If that works with months, it does. And if that works with abbreviations of months, it does. And if that works with abbreviations of days of the week, it does. What if I needed that same approach to be able to work with information that I would generate? For example, a list of people that you always want to be at the top of your list, even a sorted list. You want these folks to be at the top. Well, you know, if you do a sort, you know you can sort by almost any order. But let me show you something cool. This is also going to depend where it is in Excel. based on which version of Excel you have. But where I'm going right now is to my File menu. And I'm going to the very bottom left of the screen where I have options. And when the options come up, I'm going to find on the left side the Advanced selection and go all the way to the bottom of that screen. It's amazing that Excel keeps hiding some of the coolest stuff, don't you think? But what I'm looking for right now is an option that's called Custom Lists. And so we're going to click that button right now and see what happens. You now get a sense of why January and Sunday worked. Microsoft actually populates that information in there. But let's say we have this. Let's say I have 3 people. One's going to be named Brown. I'll put a comma there. One's going to be named, let's say, Smithson. I'm going to put a comma there. And one's going to be named Harrison. And maybe I'll even spell it right. So 3 of them separated by commas. Watch this. I'm going to click on the right side of the screen where it says Add. It's going to add it to my custom list. Now I'm done. Now I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to close out, hit OK again, and back to the sheet. And now if I type in Brown, find the fill handle, and move it down, there they are. Pretty sweet, huh? Now we have one more thing that we're going to do with that in a second, but anytime you need to play with information and sort of only type in one piece and then get the rest of them in there, a custom list is your tool. Way, way cool stuff. So with that done, let's get back to the basic list that we're in. Okay, I'm going to show you a bunch of different files that are here. We're going to use these as examples. I know people know how to do stuff like sort, right? I don't have to have this conversation, but maybe I do. I'll tell you why. Because of this. If I wanted to sort right now, look, I'm not going to select the column that I want because I'm only going to sort everybody's last name, and I don't want to do that. And what some people are going to do is they're going to highlight the whole list or hit that little box between the A and the 1. But I say no and no. I say let's make it as easy as possible. Remember those rules? Rule 2, no blank rows, no blank columns, no exceptions. Here's why. Because when you set up a list properly in Excel, it will expand to include everything until it finds the first blank column and the first blank row. So if I want to do a sort or a filter or almost anything applicable to the entire spreadsheet, all I got to do is click in the list. Then I'll go to my data menu and then I'll go to sort. And right now this is sorted by date. Let's make a change. Let's sort this just quickly by last name. Pretty cool, right? We can make that change. But what about that custom list? You know, really when you think about it, what if I wanted to pop a couple people to the top of this list? Well, let me show you this. We have, again, in data, in sort, but instead of order A to Z, we're going to look at custom list. Ooh, bet you never saw that one. And if you did, I'm really impressed. Once we choose that, I'm going to choose the list that I want. I have one in there with Spellos, Smith, and Jones. I'm going to hit OK. Now, if all those people aren't in your list, don't worry about it. As long as one of them is in there, they will pop up to the top. So we want this sorted by last name. We want it sorted based on a particular order. So now Spellos and both Smiths are up there. And then after that, we're in the alpha order that we want. So a very basic functionality like sort is really cool, but it's also really important to understand that we have additional cool tools that we can utilize to be able to enhance even the basic stuff within Excel. Okay, so we've talked about the basic of sorting, the basic of filtering. Everyone should know, and if you don't, it's a great opportunity right now just for me to be able to say, if I click on the filter icon, we're still in the data menu, which by the way is where all the cool stuff tends to live. Now I have the drop downs that I could use any particular column to say I only want people staying at the Hilton, and I only want the people who are in single rooms, and maybe I only want them if they arrive on the 13th or 14th. You get the idea how easy it is to be able to create sublists. This is really important. I never want you taking a set of data and copying it into another workbook. If you can't do it within a tool that already allows you to keep all your data intact. I want to get rid of those filters. I can do so column by column, but even more simply, I can just go back up to the top of the screen where it says filter. I can click that filter icon again, and those filters disappear. And oh, by the way, if I save a list that's filtered, all the data is still there. It's not going away. Great. So now, a couple of shortcuts we're going to talk about. Number one, you should know, and again, I don't know, you do. The thing with Excel is really interesting, is that we all say you should know this and you should know that, but the bottom line is we are all pretty much self-taught. You know, most of us didn't take a class with elementary Excel, then intermediate, then advanced, and learn that way. We learned based on what we needed to know. So a couple of shortcuts, and then I'm going to talk about a tool I'm happy to give away to you. If I go to column J, cell 4, and it says 4 nights paid by org, but it's not all there, and I want to do some editing, best thing to do, hit your function 2 key. And that will give it a full screen capability to see everything that's in there. F2 is the easiest way to edit large formulas, whether they're text, whether they're data, whether they're going to be numbers, whether they actually are a massive formula, stuff that we're going to talk about in a second. The other thing we want to talk about is what's in J11. Now, if we look at that and I expand that particular column, notice that it actually takes the information at a certain point and it moves it. So if I'm going to start reducing this, it's going to change where the break is. Here's the thing. If I wanted the break after the word refrigerator, or actually after the word with, okay, and I went in here to this cell and just hit enter, all I'm going to do is close up the cell. But if I use the Alt key with enter, that's how we can use a hard break within Excel to be able to access information. Few more, pretty cool, right? By the way, and for people who are on this call, not seeing it on Memorex as it were, but seeing it live, I do have something I want to share with you. And if you just send me a note, I'll give you my email address. I have a really cool top 10, actually top 20 list of my favorite Excel shortcuts. So send me a note, happy to get it to you. In fact, what I'll do at this point is I'll just go into chat and put my email address right there so you can see it and you can send me information, and I'm sure I'm going to be busy answering questions the rest of the day, but that's okay. So let's get back to Excel because that's what the stuff's really happening, right? Okay, so let's talk about some really cool tricks. We spent some time on basic, fundamental, even in the intermediary, but now we got certain things we need to be able to do. I want to show you a different document right now. And when we deal with Excel and some of its functionality, one of the things that comes up always is that people send you lists that aren't properly formatted. And I wouldn't be surprised if most, if not all of you, have seen a list like this at some point. Now, I can ask what's wrong here, and you're going to say a couple of things. You're going to say, oh, man, the first and last name are in the same field. How am I going to sort on that? You might also say, well, it's all uppercase. How do I deal with that? Let's take both of those one at a time. The first one could be one of the coolest old school Excel tricks out there, and it's called text to columns. Now, in this case, we have a list that is sort of good. We'll highlight column A, but you're going to notice that there's a couple of people in there, one person actually, who has not just a last name, but Van Hassel. This is a 90% perfect process we're going to look at, and I love the 90% of it. So I'm going to start the process of utilizing what's called text to columns by highlighting the column I wish to affect. Unlike sort, where we don't want to do that, in this case we do. I'm then going to go to the data menu, but before I do that, I have to think about this, because if I start this process, where's the information going to go? Well, if I'm pulling the last names out, the likely place it's going to go is here, the next column, which means it's going to overwrite data I have in there. So when I start a text to columns process, the first thing I do is I just grab about 3, or in this case 4 blank columns. I right click, I hit insert, and that's going to give me, 4 blank columns so that this information isn't going to get overridden. I don't care if I put in there more than I need. Reason's simple. I can always delete them later. Back to column A. We go to A. We go up to the data menu. Told you, cool stuff lives there. And then we go to the right of sort and filter to where it says text to columns, and we click. And now it's going to give us 2 options, delimited or fixed width. Fixed width is such an archaic approach to databases 25 years ago. We're going to choose delimited, which is the default. And all a delimiter is a separator. It's when you hear a CSV file, comma separated values, it means that the file and the data from field to field is separated with a comma. In this case, this isn't comma separated values. This is space separated values. Now, why they have tab as the default, I have no idea. But I'm going to click on space. I'm going to click finish. There's already data here. Well, no, there isn't, because we've already blanked out those columns. And now look what happens. Now I've done the beautiful thing. And as you see, it's not a perfect process. I'm going to need to get Van Hassel in one field. So you might have to do a little bit of work playing with this, but imagine how much time you're going to save utilizing a text to columns approach. In fact, I can get rid of column C completely right now if I wanted to, and I will, because we have one more issue to deal with here. We have the issue of case. We have the issue of this Twinkie who put this spreadsheet together, put it all in uppercase, or maybe they put it all in lowercase. Well, if you're dealing with Word, it's a menu function. When you're dealing with Excel, it's a function. In fact, we know a function equals sum equal some 450 of them, almost impossible to remember. But in this case, what if I said equal proper A2? When you're using the proper function, it will turn it into a proper name function. First letter capitalized, the rest not. If I wanted to make it all lowercase, what would I do? Well, I would change proper into lower. But here's the thing, I want both those in one field. Maybe I need it for a particular mail merge I'm doing. What if I then said here equal proper A2 and, oops, I got to close that parentheses. Don't forget to do that. Excel always gets pissed to do there. And proper B2. The and is what's called a concatenator. It will join text together. But you see the mistake there. It didn't put a space in there. So let's edit that again. And we're going to say equal proper A2. I want the proper version of what's in cell A2. And I want something else. I need a space. So after that ampersand, I'm going to hit quote, space, quote. Anything inside of quotes is going to be put in there as a literal string. And then I'm going to put the ampersand it again. And now we've set this up just how we want it. And because of the fill handle, which we all know and love, we drag it down and there it is. Still got one issue there, because if I was to now get rid of cell A2, I'm also going to get rid of at the same time my first name there. We don't want that. So we need to make that column bulletproof. How do we do that? Well, we cut and almost paste. That's kind of silly, isn't it? It's actually called paste special. So if I highlight the people that I want to make bulletproof, these particular results, and I go and copy, I'm going to hit Control C just to do it. You can do it any way you want. But now, instead of hitting Control V or paste, I'm going to hit this little down arrow here, and I'm going to paste values, options, special. Gives me all sorts of functionality. What I want to choose here is values. I want the value of what's in there to go in there and not just have a formula. Hit OK. It says there's a circular reference in there. I'm not sure why that is. So let's see what I've done wrong, because always we can do things that just don't work the right way. We hit copy. We go to paste. We go to paste special. We choose values. We hit OK. There we go. Don't know why the first one didn't work, but I'll prove to you the second one did, because when I get rid of my name in A2, nothing happens there. Now I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to say, Gloria, any questions yet that we need to deal with before we keep moving forward?
We do have a question, and I'm so glad that you stopped, because Richard Hart just posted a question with an equation in it and says, does equals proper in parentheses A2 colon B2 work? Question mark.
Let's take a look. So equal proper.
Yep.
And could you read that again? A2 colon B2?
Colon B2. Close
nope.
paren. Does that work?
Not going to work. The problem there is we have to take it from a single level. So again, equal proper A2, close the paren, and then we're going to put in that blank space, and proper B2. That is the proper and the correct approach to being able to take those two cells and combining them. That's the concatenation. In fact, Excel has released a new formula called concat that can do that. But I'm so, funny enough, old school with Excel. I like taking it this way and using it this way because I have more visual control and understanding of what's going to happen there. So you can't use that colon. A great thought, though. You know, one thing about the colon, one of the few places it works is in some. There are a couple of fields and a couple of the functions that do support the colon, but don't think of it as a text-based tool because it really doesn't work that way. Other questions, or you want me to keep going on?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a clarification for something. I'm getting a lot of people that are typing in the Q&A bank asking for the Excel cheat sheet. I'd like to reiterate that Jim is happy to send that to you. Please email him directly, not here in chat or in the Q&A bank. Please email Jim for that cheat sheet of his top equations that he was talking about at J Spellos. That's JSPELLOS at meeting, meeting-u.com. So it's jspellos at meeting-u.com. So I'm going to send that to one of the posters here. Also, Stacy Pike asks, Jim, can the plus sign be used instead of the ampersand sign?
Not there, nope. It is specific just to the ampersand. I remember when I first learned that, I was so frustrated by that because you think the plus sign is the perfect tool to use. But again, think about it this way. Excel delineates mathematics with the plus and minus, but it delineates text aggregation with other characters, especially the ampersand there. So again, all those issues, things that are such reasonable questions because it would make sense that it would work that way. And guess what? It doesn't. So before we move on to doing some charting here, and I got 35 minutes to show you 14 hours worth of cool stuff, I want to make sure you're clear on a tool that you've seen, but you may not have given a name to. And the tool is called an absolute reference. Now, let's just take a look right here at this basic sum. Equal sum B5 times E1 times E2, and E2 and E1 being tax and gratuity you want applied to a particular meal that you're getting so you get the full price. Pretty straightforward approach. The problem here is this, is that if I use the fill handle with a static formula, a static piece of information, we're going to get all sorts of errors. Why? Because in the next cell, it's going to say, okay, B6, because we're moving it down one, E2 and E3. Well, E2 does have information. It's the wrong information for what we want, and E3 clearly is empty. So what we need to do, and what you always have to be aware of, is that when you look and enter a formula, if you have information that can't move, you want to put the dollar sign between both the column and the row header. In this case, it is both in E1 and in E2. And in fact, you can type it in, but a cool shortcut, and I'm just going to hover my cursor and put it inside of where it says E1. Again, PC folks, if you hit the F4 key, it will start cycling that around automatically. So nothing's in there now. I hit the F4 key and it absolutes both the row and the column. I hit it again, it's only going to absolute the row. I hit it again, it's only going to absolute the column. So I can always just use that key to be able to make sure once I've typed in the formula, I just hit F4 till I get how I want that to remain static. And we do that so that when we do the fill handle and go down here, it is going to take into consideration all the information that is statically there. Anytime you see a dollar sign, just understand that's nothing more. It's not a money reference. It's not a cash reference. It's an absolute reference within Excel. Really, really cool stuff. Really, really useful. Next up on the conversation, I mentioned charts. Let's get here. Actually, we're going to do two things here. We're going to talk about three-dimensional formulas, which I think is a really funny way to say formulas that work across different spreadsheets. And we're going to talk about charting. Let's do that three-dimensional formula first. So I got some budgets here. I have a couple of sheets at the bottom. Spring conference, summer conference, fall conference, all cool. But my year expenses and the actuals are all empty. Now, we talk about setup in Excel all the time. We talked about it with no blank rows, no blank columns, and first row headers. In this case, when I'm dealing with budgets, it's really important to understand that in each of the rows, I have the same information. Row 4 is buses. Row 8 is entertainment. Row 11 is lead retrieval. And no matter where I go in this list, I have made these sheets identical. This, my friends, will save you endless amounts of time because now we're going to build what's called the 3D formula. Pretty straightforward. I want to take the information from here, the blank information, and add to it all my different conferences. But we want to do so using my favorite word, cheating. You see, I don't want you to have to type all these things in longhand. Let's see how this works. We're going to start with equal sum. Wait, no, it's the wrong sum. Sorry about that. Equal sum parentheses. And now I tell people get their hands away from the keyboard because what we want to do at this point is identify where the information is. Which sheet do we want to start? And we want to start with the one at the far left, Spring Conference. So I'm going to click on Spring Conference, and you're going to see I'm not going to be able to hit F2 because I want to make sure that we keep this fluid and workable. But now see Spring Conf and an exclamation point in there. Okay, remember exclamation, we talked about dollar signs. Exclamation points are references for worksheets. So whenever Excel sees that, it's not just understanding it's a cell, it's a sheet. But now we want to do that for all of these. And somebody might say, what if I hit control, click each one? That would work. But what if you had 22 different budgets you needed to synthesize together? This is where a little bit of setup goes a long way. I'm going to hover over, but not click on, hover over where it says Fall Conference, the last of the sheets in that row. Notice year expenses is not in the middle there. That would create serious circular references. Before I hit click, I'm going to hold down my shift key and then hit click. And what that's going to do in the URL bar or the formula bar is tell Spring Conference : Fall Conference exclamation. This is a three-dimensional reference. We're pulling it from multiple sheets. Now all we have to do is tell it which cell we want to pull it from, which would be C2. I can do one of two things. I can just click in cell C2, but since I'm going to need to finish this out on the keyboard, I'm going to type in, or C3 I should say, I'm going to type in hit C3, close your parentheses, hit enter, and admire. Because there is an incredible 3D reference that if I now use the fill handle and brought it down, I have everything done for my budget for January 1, or whatever the first date of your fiscal year is, to have all of those totals automatically be filtering in to my year to date. So again, a three-dimensional reference is a reference that pulls data from multiple sheets within a workbook. By the way, Excel doesn't want to tell you this, but it also can pull data from multiple workbooks. And that's a pretty cool tool as well. But easiest way for most people is utilizing this approach with Shift and a click shift. Pretty sweet stuff. Now, let's get back to Spring Conference for a second, because I want to do a little bit of work. I want to pull out some of the actuals and make a chart. I'm going to show you the easiest cheating approach there is in Excel. Okay, so column B is not what I want to deal with right now. I want the labels in A, I want the actuals in C. So in order to make my life easier, and hopefully make your life easier, I'm going to right click on column B and choose hide. And that will reduce it, remove it from the screen, but doesn't get rid of it, it's still there. And now I want to pull a chart based on this information, the information in rows 6 through 9. Now, where I find people have made a lot of charting mistakes, silly charting mistakes actually, is by not selecting the cells themselves, but selecting the row numbers. You're going to be in Excel chart you know what for days if you do this. Instead, what I want you to do when you're choosing a chart is make sure your labels and your data is adjacent. It's just a great starting point. Then select it. Now you are one keyboard stroke away from getting your chart done. The question is, which key? Should I tell them? Yeah, I guess so. F11. When you hit the F11 key, that is the quick shortcut, which is redundant, by the way, I understand, to making a chart. You say, well, I don't like that chart type. Well, you can call which one is built based on F11 by going into, on the top menu, chart, change chart type. Maybe you want a pie chart. But what you can do here, when you found the pie chart style that you want, is you can right click your mouse and set that as your default chart for F11. Pretty amazing functionality that's there. I'll hit that, hit OK. And just to prove that it worked, we'll go to the summer conference. We'll get rid of the budget. We'll do it one more time just to make sure I know we're going fast here. And that's some of the challenges of doing this without a lot of interactivity. But I'm going to pull this together, hit F11, and the chart I've chosen as my default, guess what, is my default chart. Just what we want. Pretty sweet stuff, one-click charts. So we've dealt with 3D formulas. We've dealt with creating charts. Now let's move forward even further. Let's go to another set of data. I have this data in month and date, state, last name of the salesperson, the amount of commission they got, and we need a report. What did we do in January? How much did we pay out in commission in February? What did salesperson Dean do? What did we do in the state of Maryland? I know you can all write formulas. What I want you to do is not write formulas. I want you to use the tools Excel has. And here's where we play in the land of pivot tables. A pivot table is nothing more than a really bad name for a tool that allows you to extract data from multiple columns and rows and allows you to sort and slice and dice it the way you want. That's the every person's definition of a pivot table. How do you do it? Easy. First thing we need to do is do what? Select the column header or a couple of row headers or that corner. No, what we want to do is click anywhere in the list. No blank rows, no blank columns and rows. Couldn't even remember that name. Is how we want to make sure that we include everything in there. Then, pretty straightforward. We go to the insert menu at the top left of the screen. We choose pivot table, and the options it's going to give us right now are the defaults that we are going to accept. We want to select that table range. It's A2 through E119, and we want to put it in a new worksheet. You can, by the way, put it in existing worksheets, and that, when you really start getting into stuff like dashboards, is an incredible tool to have multiple pivot tables on a single screen as a great opening page to the workbook. But for now, hit OK, and once we do that, it gives me a template on the right and a little bit of a pivot table landing spot on the left. This is what I want to do, okay? Before we even get to moving stuff around, I want my months at the top and I want my states on the left side. I want a basic table. So we go to where it says pivot table fields on the right. We find month because it's finding each of the headers for the first row, hence why we do that. I'm going to click the box right there, and it's going to put it in the wrong place. You see, I said I wanted it at the top, but it put it on the side. Now, if we look down to where we have the drag fields between areas below, that word tells us something. I can click and hold month and move it from rows to columns and set it up the way I want it. Cool. Next up, state. Click the checkbox. Goes there. So we want to do 1,000 formulas at once. This total dollar value, and click on it. There you go. Your pivot table's done. As simple as it is, it's elegant and it's useful. But we got more, because maybe we want it broken down not only by state but by last name. Well, everything you have as a column, as essentially data in your fields, you can now add to your pivot table. So if I wanted to take that last name and add it, I'm just going to click to see what happens. I'm never even afraid of where Excel is going to put it, because I know I'm going to be able to move it the place I want it. So when I click there, it is a complete mess. I didn't want it organized that way. I wanted it organized by the name first and then the state. No problem. Go back down to the bottom right side of the screen where it says rows, and I'm going to take state, click, hold, drag it below last name. Oh, awesome. Now I got a lot of cool stuff here. But maybe I want to do even more with this. For example, in the mid-teens, Excel came out with some pretty cool pivot table tools. And the two we want to talk about right now are slicers and timelines. So We need to be in the pivot table analyze menu, and we're going to choose an insert slicer. And what do we want to slice it by? Well, I want to slice it by the last name of the salesperson. So I click that, click OK. Now I'm just going to move this over. And in fact, what I'm going to do here, just for giggles, I'm going to get rid of last name from this just so we have a very big aggregate set of data. Now we want this to review only salesperson Aaron. Click Aaron. You want Dean instead? Not a problem. Maybe Dean and Zippy. Well, that's a control click there. And in fact, what we really need to do, because of all this data, is that we need to reinsert their last name into this list and make sure it's in the right place as always. And now we have all that information however we want it. We want just salesperson Charles. You get the idea that once you set up a pivot table, how you slice and dice information truly is up to you. Please do me a favor. Don't be paralyzed by the enormity of what a pivot table can do, or in some cases, the poor instruction that is given to identify how to use it. By the way, I always tell people that the three words you need to know in utilizing this great program is Excel help doesn't. Never has, never will. It's just not a good help menu. I tried to learn pivot tables years ago through help, not even a clue. Back then, I went to a bookstore. Now, I go to YouTube, and all this information is out there. So understand that all a pivot table is big data that we're chunking out the way we want it. We talked about two different tools, though. We talked about a slicer, also mentioned a timeline. So let's go back to the pivot table analyze menu, and next to slicer is insert timeline. Now, it's only going to pull up timelines, obviously months, dates that are part of the fields. And so what I want to do here is, okay, let me just take this only in January. Maybe I just want to see May. Maybe I want to see a range of February through June. Get how simple this is? I mean, really, we got some very strong, powerful tools that are literally a click away. So I want you thinking about how a pivot table can truly change your ability to slice, dice, work with data in a way that doesn't make you a slave to all these functions. But speaking of functions, it's still good to know a few of them. So we're going to go back to that first workbook here, because I told you early on that we had some stuff that was in a separate sheet. I called it the summary sheet that had our tallies. And actually, one or two of these are pretty important to understand. In fact, we're going to play with one of them right now. You see where it says single and double room nights for Hilton? I want you to look in there at the formula in the formula bar right now. I got to tell you, I can never figure that. I mean, yeah, I can figure it out, but the curly bracket means it's an array formula, and you can't just put that bracket in there. It became really difficult to do multiple polls and multiple formulas within the data set that you had, until later on, Excel simplified it. And in fact, we're going to use a tool right now that's called Sumifs. Sum information, ifs, plural, something is true. Now, with that said, any of these tools, you can commit to memory 430 or 440 different tools, or you can, let me hear it, cheat, right? That's what we want you to do right here. We want to build a formula by cheating. How do we do that? Well, we start by putting our cursor where we want the data. We go to formulas, and we find at the far left the insert function bar. You know, all the stuff to the right of this, recently used financial login, well, recently used is pretty important. All these other ones, I'm never sure where that information, where that function lives. So I go to insert function. And I'm going to go, okay, let me just, instead of most recently used, go to all. And somebody told me Sumifs is pretty cool. Let me find it. I know it's a long scroll. There's a lot of stuff here, but I'm going to find it here, and now I'm going to let Excel walk me through building a function. You see, mastering the simple is such a powerful tool. So when I look at Sumifs and put OK, it's telling me now what we want to sum. So what is the sum range? What's the column that we want to sum? Well, now I don't remember all that. There's too much information there. No worries at all, because again, we're going to cheat. You see that little up arrow right over here, right over here. That's pretty cool. That's called a collapsed dialog box. And the reason it's called that is I can't do anything right now here without getting out of this dialog box, except if I find a button that looks like that. Because now I can click on it. It collapses what they call the function arguments. I can go back to my housing list and I can tell it which column do we want to sum. Well, we want to sum the room nights. That would be F. Cool. Now I'm going to expand it again. And so now it's do that, but do that for conditions, for criteria. Now you might not have remembered, but the criteria you want are the people staying in the Sheraton Hotel and staying in a double room. So criteria range 1, doesn't matter which order you put it in. I'm going to go back to housing list. I'm going to choose column H. That's the hotel column. And then I'm going to type in here the word Sheraton. Notice though that when I hit the tab key, it gives me a running tally. Cool. It also lets me build a second criteria range. Well, the second one we want is for double occupancy. So, oops, wrong one. We go to column G, which is type. And again, all I keep doing is hitting that collapse, which then becomes the expand dialog box. And instead here, I'm going to type in double, hit OK, because now I've built an absolutely beautiful simplified formula that allows me to pull from multiple columns any way I want. Understand the powerful adding tools of sum, which tallies up a particular column, and count, which counts the number of records. Both can be used in singular and plural options with words such as if. So sum if allows you to sum if one condition is true, but sum ifs plural gives you that capability with multiple conditions. And again, when you send me that note for the cheat sheet and all the cool shortcuts, I'll throw in some of these workbooks that I have here that you can play with them and steal, I mean, borrow the formulas, because guess what? It's all about making sure you're as productive as possible. Next up, though, we want to end this conversation. I know it's pretty odd that we're getting past the time that we had for this, but in 2019, Excel really upped their game tremendously, and they increased and inserted a series of new formulas. Formulas that look quite simple, actually. They're called dynamic array formulas. And essentially, at its essence, as it says on the screen, it's the formulas that use a return to more than a single value, creating a list. And all an array is, by the way, it's your list, it's your information. But they do this using a term called spill ranges, which essentially are blank rows and columns beneath where the formula is that the data can spill into. Still not sure? Let's take a look, a simple look. We all know how to sort. We can do the sort, we went over it earlier, but where I want you to focus your attention now is in the formula in cell F2. I've made this in red and yellow, so when you grab this, you can actually see where the formula is. We are now, instead of selecting formula from the data menu, we're typing it as a function. Now what we're giving it, the arguments we're giving it are, well, 3 of them. The first one, table 3, all that is, by the way, just so we're clear on this, is I named this data beginning with A2, going down to D20. I named it table 3. I could have named it Harry or Sarah, it doesn't matter. You can take any set of data and just type in that name box, a name. That's pretty sweet to know. But yeah, I could have also done A2 colon D20. That works as well. Table 3 is kind of clean, don't you think? So I'm telling you here, table 2 or table 3, I can't even read. And then the next thing is the number 2. What that means is, what do I want to sort? I want to sort on the second column in order. The first column is A, that's first. The second column is B. I want last name sort. Third one is number 1, which means I want it in ascending order. If I wanted it in descending order, I'd put -1. And in fact, that's what I'm going to change right here. Put a -1 in there, hit enter, and now that entire list is now sorted. Now, why bother? You can sort. Well, first of all, this is obviously a stepping stone to something we're going to talk about in a second. But what if I took Bob Smith's name and maybe put in his other name, which is Aaron? It now automatically and dynamically sorts that information in real time, which is a pretty cool feature in and of itself. So again, we're starting the dynamic array conversation slowly because we want to see it with something that we used to do and are comfortable doing time and time again. And oh, by the way, for the sheet, which is one of the things I'm happy to send to you, I put instructions here too. So if you forget all the stuff I'm talking about, no, that's not a bad thing to do. So anyway, what if we wanted something a little bit different? What if we wanted to be able to do it sorting by multiple columns?
Hey, Jim,
So,
can
yeah,
I just want to jump in here rather than
sure.
hold it for our Q&A time.
Hmm.
Somebody posted a little bit ago, can you use a variable A3 instead of the word Sheraton in that formula when you were transitioning your spreadsheet?
The answer is yes, and I'll tell you why. You can, but you darn well better be sure you never change the contents of A3. So if I chose a cell reference, that is absolutely acceptable. But if I ever change the data, I could be changing that entire formula. So from my perspective, and this is a personal choice, I like to put the actual name in there. And actually there's two reasons for that. One is to make sure that the purity of the data remains consistent. The other thing is somebody ever has to troubleshoot, they now don't have to go back out to see what's in A3, see what you put there. I like it visual, but you certainly can. Your call on that one. Great question.
Um, and
Another
the
one?
other thing, yeah, no, the other thing I just wanted to mention, because I'm getting a lot of things populating in chat and Q&A.
Mhm.
If you want to get the cheat sheet that Jim has referenced, please don't post here. Please email Jim directly at jspellos, and that's J, the letter J, Spellos, Spellos, at meeting-u.com. I'm going to put it in the chat window to everybody. So if you want to receive a copy of that, please email Jim directly, because that's intellectual property that he doesn't want shared with others outside of our TUG community, and that way he can control it. So Jim, back to you.
Thanks so much. And by the way, if you don't even want to go to chat right now, I've put my email address right on line 21. It's right there. You can see it there, but we're going to be moving. Only got a few more minutes. We talked about single sort. What about a dynamic double sort? Well, we can do that here using not sort, but in this case, sort by. So let's just unpack this. The first part of this is the array. Where's the list? Well, I called this table from A2 to D18. I called it new sort by. I could have called it Frank or Harriet, doesn't matter. Next thing up, what's the first sort I want to enable? Column D, the product. Are they getting a widget? Are they getting a subscription? Now what I did next to that is put a -1. I don't want it in ascending order. I want it in descending order. So you cheat by looking at the right side. You're going to see how that result comes in. But then I also want to have a second sort for all the people getting widgets or all the people getting just subscriptions. I put in C2 to C18, and then I use the positive number 1 to have that in ascending order. So within subscription, and let's take a look right here, it says Midwest first, then Northeast, then Southwest, then West. All you have to do is put this in here once and everything else comes back. Let me show you something here. I'm going to do this and make sure that I do this properly. I'm going to delete this. You see what happens when we're dealing with dynamic ranges? Nothing's happening right now. And by the way, this doesn't have to be yellow. It's just there for teaching purposes, for visual purposes. And now when I build that formula in there, I'm typing in and typing it in. I know I've cheated, but I'm typing it in and typing it in. And then the minute I hit enter, that's the spill range happening. That's what's coming down automatically. But I don't even think we've hit the real zenith of the power here, is we have the ability to not just sort, but to filter. And we're going to see right here the filter that's coming from this list, coming from A1 to D18. And then we wanted to filter what's in column C, C1 to C18, by the word West. And yeah, you could use and or asterisk or plus in this case to be able to add additional filters. You might ask what this nothing to filter is. I'm going to show you, because if I was to make a mistake in typing in West, and maybe I put a Q in there and hit enter, that is the error message that's going to come up if nothing is resolved correctly. But in this case, I know there should be something. I go back to my formula, I get rid of that Q, And now you see it work. And by the way, if you look down at F20, you're going to see I have that filter in there for two different conditions. I have it based for the entire list in column C being West. Then I use that asterisk. Again, it's really weird because I said earlier that only works with math, but in these new dynamic arrays, they've broken their own rules, which they're allowed, they're Microsoft, right? And in this case, D18 only if they're in a widget. Pretty amazing stuff.
Jim,
So, yep,
I'm gonna jump in here and interrupt you one more time because this
sure.
is so rich in content. I want to make sure that we don't get too far away. Somebody posted and said for the dynamic sorting, do we have to put in the header or will it autofill as we name the table?
No, the header you do have to put in separately. What we are sorting and what we are putting in there is just the data. So just so you know, in the back end work I did here, I took this header and I literally replicated it here. You only want that sorting to pull the data. If I hadn't put that header there, it would still work just fine. In fact, I just deleted all that. Maybe I'll use a format painter to make it just look like all those other fields. It doesn't matter what's in there. But I think from our visual standpoint, we need to make sure that that information is there because otherwise that data is going to be sitting there. We're not sure what it is. But again, with the sorting, don't include the header if you're utilizing either the A2 to D20 approach or if you're using a named range. Hopefully that clarifies that. And actually, we're at a point right now at 2:55 where that pretty much was where we were going to be in this entire conversation. There's so much more that we know we could talk about. But today's menu was about 5 things. It was about mastering the formulas and understanding how important that was. It's also about making sure that we had the shortcuts that you need, the cool tricks, some Pro Tour, including that pivot table, as well as getting you to start understanding the incredible potential of dynamic arrays. With that said, Gloria, I'm going to give it back to you. Let's get people's questions answered.
I have one so far that says, can you go back and revisit again what a dynamic array is, Jim?
Sure can. Again, I know it's an important thing. A dynamic array is nothing more than a list that automatically can build and sort and filter on itself. Instead of being a static piece of information, it's triggered by a single cell that we put a formula in, and then all the information pulls down or spills naturally. So just think of a dynamic array as a dynamic formula. That might be an easier way to be able to really synthesize that information.
Makes sense. For sure, it makes sense. I don't see anything else that is populated thus far in the question bank. So I'll say that if you have any additional questions, and also reiterate again that if you would like that cheat sheet from Jim, please feel free to reach out to him and email him at jspellos@meetingu. Whoops, wait a minute, here comes one more, a little last minute straggler here. You mentioned not putting a logo on an Excel spreadsheet. Is there a way to add photos of product to an Excel sheet? This would provide a customer with a product list.
Absolutely. In fact, what I'm going to do, Gloria, is I'm going to take over the screen one more time and show that because I think it's really important that people understand what you can do with that and why I was so focused on saying you shouldn't do it. It's not that I thought you shouldn't do it. For example, as you see here, I have 2 images here, TUG image and a little cutesy menu image. What I was referring to is don't put the logos in row 1. If you need it at the top of the screen, use your header and footer. To insert any sort of image within Excel, it's as straightforward as it is in Word. All you have to do is go to your Insert menu, and then you go to Pictures, and then you take it from there, whether you want it on this device or you want stock images. I always tend to use this device. And by the way, I always make sure that I'm using images that I'm allowed to use. But you know, when you're working with a client, having their logo there is a pretty cool thing. That visual formatting is something that's sort of the last thing you want to do. Make sure Excel is laid out and set up in such a way that you're able to literally enforce all the rules that we want instead of thinking about Excel to be able to make it pretty, because Excel is about functionality. Pretty second. We all like pretty, but we don't want it to be the driving force of how we get our data organized.
So would it be better, just to kind of parlay on the question a little bit, would it be better for somebody to just go ahead and put it in kind of in a down and dirty format and then export it into either a Word document that then you can convert to a PDF and upload to a customer of your product list? Is that the better way to go, Jim?
Well, if you're doing a mail merge, obviously we know how easy mail merges can be for some people, that the mail merge itself allows you to then have that formatted and have the data coming in. But I think with a lot of folks, they would just want to see the core data and not have to deal with a merge that then pulls it away from its source. So choice is yours. Mail merge works with the pictures there. But again, what I would do is I would take that image, I just throw it anywhere in the sheet and let it sit there, and then get all the data organized. And then once I've done that, be able to take the information and show that and place that picture exactly where I want it.
Yeah, makes sense. I don't see anything else that's populated. One more time, I'm going to reiterate, if you would like that cheat sheet or have any additional questions, feel free to email Jim at jspellos@meeting-u.com. And on that note, Jim, I'd like to say thank you for the deep dive into Excel. For anybody that knows me knows I was lost after about the first 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of people hang in here. We had at one time 190 that were on at one time viewing at our top peak. And I think we're down to about 160 and change right now. So thank you to all of you who have logged in today for today's program. We appreciate you being here. And I want to tell you that we love having you as TUG members. Please continue the conversation on the forum board. And for those of you who are not members yet, please visit www.theusergroup.org and join us today. Make sure you check your inbox also for the registration link for our upcoming Friday Znode webinar. And on that note, I'm going to say again, thanks to everyone for joining us. Jim, always thanks for the brilliant education that you bring to our TUG members. And on that note, as they say in Hollywood, that's the wrap. Bye, folks.